All right, welcome to the Snyder Report. I am your host, Gary Snyder. Before we get to our guest that you see probably right now on either side of me, wave. We need to thank our sponsors. First of all, Robin Winston. Robin has been a great sponsor of not only the newsletter, which goes out to 100,000 plus daily, but he's also helped us get the podcast started right here for the Snyder Report. And then we need to thank former Congresswoman Jill Long Thompson. She is also a sponsor of the newsletter and the podcast, and she has a book out, Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. So make sure you get that anywhere you buy your books. With me now is State Representative Carey Hamilton and State Representative Cherrish Pryor. I might add also awesome sponsors almost from the start. I think both of you have for the newsletter. So thank you very much for that support.
Of course.
You're welcome.
Now, the reason we had you on tonight, there's just so much going on as the General Assembly winds down. I'm just going to start right off the top with the news that, is making all the headlines now. That has to do with our Lieutenant Governor, Micah BeQwith, and our Secretary of State, Diego Morales, kind of trying to skate a new law that prohibits them from buying luxury SUVs. And what did they do? Went out and spent almost $90,000 respectively on new, really nice SUVs. We had Tom Lobiasco on the other day. He actually got a ride in Micah, so we were a little caught off guard with that. But Carey, let's start with you. Your thoughts on Micah and Diego and luxury SUVs.
Well, so much for efficiency and the Doge energy they've been promoting in their on their social media. I mean, it's shameful, frankly. The Secretary of State, Diego Morales, first purchased his car last summer. That prompted the bill that our colleague Mitch Gore filed this session. And now Micah BeQwith, right before the bill becomes law, wants to skate in and get his fancy vehicle on the taxpayer dime. And it's not okay. It's not acceptable. But I think it's emblematic of fiscal responsibility just out the window across the board after 20 years of Republican control of the purse strings.
Cherrish?
I just think about how our taxpayers are doing right now. And the fact that $1,000 car, luxury vehicle, would be two cars for the average Hoosier. And I think about the folks that are losing their jobs right here in the state of Indiana and across the nation, quite frankly. And those individuals who probably really do need a vehicle are going to have to find alternative ways to get around and to do their daily activities for what they need, while their taxpayer money is going to fund $90,000 vehicles that were not needed when, they could have gotten to make a $40,000 vehicle, which could have done the exact same thing. I just can't compute in my head why someone would think a $90,000 vehicle on the taxpayer dime is a good and reasonable and responsible thing to do. I just don't understand it.
Well, Micah, I believe, offered up the excuse that he has men driving him and in his vehicle. Doesn't help his cause, does it?
No.
Actually, it makes it worse, quite frankly. To say that only men can only ride in luxury vehicles is a shame. You can get a very reasonable car for $40,000 or $45,000. That's going to do the same thing. So you said it right. It's an excuse.
Carey?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think enough said on this topic. It's shameful. It's embarrassing. It's a slap in the face to every single taxpayer in the state of Indiana.
Well, let me ask you this real quick, because I know Indianapolis columnist James Briggs has suggested that maybe Diego should resign. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, boy. I think there are probably a few Republicans that are starting to wish that would happen. I don't know if they're going to have the guts to try to make it happen, but that would be in the best interests of all taxpayers. We know that his office has, he's hired his brother-in-law for a very cushy job that he created all sorts of spot bonuses for his employees again and again and again, left the country for a couple of weeks during the legislative session. And it's not acceptable behavior, and we can't let it be normalized. We really can't. I also have to mention, when it comes to the Secretary of State, his contracts without a bidding process given to campaign donors.
Yeah,
Again, this should not be okay.
I mean, there was a list of almost $300,000 of car dealers that have given money to his campaign over the last several years.
That's right.
And then he goes and buys a car from one of them. To me, the hypocrisy just drips here. You talk about Medicaid, you have waiting lists. You're going to start limiting the number of people that can get on Medicaid. And yet you're going to go out and buy vehicles like this. Cherrish?
It's just shameful. And I agree with Carey. You can't beat a dead horse. And you can't make this stuff up. You just can't make it up.
Now, if you're just joining us here on the Snyder Report podcast, I have Representative Cherrish Pryor and State Representative Carey Hamilton. And if you notice, I do have my Washington Capitals jersey on tonight and paying homage to not Wayne Gretzky. He's the one that got his record broken, but Ovechkin breaking Wayne Gretzky's record today as the top goal scorer. If anybody hockey fans out there. So that's why I do have the Washington Capitals jersey on tonight. I just break it out on very solemn occasions, I guess, celebratory occasions. Well, as we get ready to head into the home stretch of the General Assembly, I think the number one topic out there besides luxury SUVs right now seems to be property taxes. Where do we stand on that? And we'll start with Cherrish.
With property taxes, we are going to hear Senate Bill, I believe it's 1 on tomorrow, in Ways and Means. That is the Republicans' property tax bill. They are also, I believe, going to roll in another bill, Senate Bill 518, which is a bill that is going to require traditional schools to share their property tax money with charter schools. The concern that I have, the initial bill, was that the average homestead owner was going to get only $48. And to my understanding, the Republicans held a press conference yesterday where they're revamping that bill. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see what that bill looks like. But I think it's really important that as we're talking about and considering property taxes, that there should, there's a recognition, there's been a recognition by me for a long time that those low income homeowners are being hit with drastic increases in their property tax bills because their assessment is going up. But my concern is that when we are proposing a property tax relief bill, the majority of the money doesn't go to the people who need it the most and the people who are standing to lose their home, but it's going to the people who actually need it the least, who are not out there and not the ones who are complaining about the property tax bill. The other concern that I have about what has been proposed by the Republicans is that it is going to hurt schools and also local units of government. Now, I think that something needs to be done, but we cannot harm local units of government. We cannot harm schools, and we have to have a targeted focus on those individuals needed the most. And it doesn't seem that my Republican colleagues are at that point right now, but I'm going to be very interested to hear and see those numbers that's going to come out of Ways and Means tomorrow to see what impact their amendment is going to make for homeowners.
Carey, before we get to you, and maybe we discussed this off camera, but maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. So the property tax, we've all seen our property taxes go up. My assessment has doubled over the last 7 years. But the way I understand it is that they want to cut property taxes, which is disproportionately going to help $1 million homes versus $100,000 or $200,000 homes. And they're going to give the ability of local governments to tax people as an income or a sales tax to make up for what they are losing from the property taxes. So they're taking they're giving the wealthiest people who have the highest net worth or assessed value of homes the biggest tax cuts, and they're going to make people that maybe don't even need or have a home or rent pay to subsidize those property taxes that are being cut. Am I too far off with that?
That's generally true. And I think a couple of things. One, in that press conference that Cherrish mentioned on Friday, we haven't seen the language, but we've got a sense of some of the high lines, and that includes actually a business personal property tax cut. So while the whole conversation's been about relief for homeowners, now it's not necessarily all going to be relief for homeowners. But to the question you just asked, I think it's really important to highlight that after 20 years of Republican control of the property tax system, but also the rest of the tax structure, they have been squeezing local governments and schools all along. So now they say, okay, we want to provide relief for homeowners. And understandably, and as Cherrish mentioned, in a targeted way, we really want to see some progress there for folks that are most stressed by the property taxes, folks on fixed income, seniors, et cetera. And also just to maybe smooth things out for everybody else, because these big hits are hard for a lot of folks. But now they've squeezed everybody else. So, but they're going to try to squeeze a little more, and it's just not sustainable. It's not sustainable. I'm incredibly frustrated with where we are today. And I would say we also see in the same budget, I'm going to segue here a little bit. Cherrish mentioned that SB 518 is going to be rolled into this bill probably tomorrow. And that is the bill that would take local school dollars and funnel them to charter districts for transportation. And whatever you think about these issues, the idea that suddenly we're going to take the really tight, efficiently managed local school dollars that they're struggling to, do everything well today, and say, okay, we're going to move these dollars over to this charter school system where you could have kids on this side of town needing to be shipped all the way. They're not creating limits, right? So all the way across town. So an incredibly inefficient use of tax dollars. Just again and again and again, that this privatization of public education is wasting tax dollars at every turn. It's creating a lack of transparency with these dollars. And this is half of the state budget. When money flows out of public schools into charters or private schools through vouchers, you lose that public school oversight, the locally elected boards. You lose the ability to make sure that things are run efficiently. And you're also putting schools just wherever someone decides to invest in a private school or in a charter school, for example, because there's a whole lot of Wall Street money coming into the charter movement, right? Very well funded, lots of campaign dollars. And so this ties to property taxes because there's only so many public dollars out there, right?
Well, let me ask a question. Does this apply to referendum money too? Because if schools want to raise more money, they have the option to do a referendum. So would the referendum money also go to charter schools under this bill? I'll start with Cherrish.
Well, we've already done that. Was it last year? A couple of years ago, we passed a bill that it might have been last year that if a traditional school has a referendum, they have to share those referendum dollars with the charter schools. And the way that is calculated is that if you have a student in your district or in your charter school and they live in that particular school district where the referendum was approved, then those dollars follow that student to that charter school. So we're already doing referendum dollars. This is the money that the schools are already getting. So this is an additional dollars because for the referendums, what schools said that they had to do was now they have, if they say, for instance, if your referendum was $1 million, and that's very low ball for a referendum. But if your referendum was $1 million, now you may have to ask for a referendum of $1.1 million because you have to share that money with the charter schools. So the referendum money is already there. For 518, which is going to be rolled into Senate Bill 1, this is money that you're already getting. And so, which makes this bill even more egregious. So now they're going to have to share money that they're already getting with the charter schools. Additionally, and Carrie kind of hit on this. We were talking about also, she mentioned the vouchers. And so we're going to be giving vouchers over $1 billion. That is money, quite frankly, that could go to property tax relief. That's money, quite frankly, that could go to traditional schools, which we are not adequately funding. So it seems like to me what's happening is they're really trying to find a way to pay for the voucher system, which is they have no control over now. And so they're having to put money in there at great amounts because they can't fund it. And so they don't want to fund it out of the surplus that we have of money. And so the way that they're doing that is getting it from everywhere else. Not to mention, the fact that we have 200,000 people that we're getting ready to drop off of Medicaid. I mean, so it's just a system that is unsustainable. Like, Gary said, the Republicans they've been driving the car all this time. And so they've made this mess, and their way of cleaning it up is going to hurt and harm a lot of people.
Carrie, anything to add on this?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's fun going back and forth with Cherrish. We compliment each other on these issues. To add a fine point,
I'm just here to look pretty, so.
You're doing a great job with that Washington shirt on. Just to highlight for folks, of that $1 billion in voucher money going to private schools, there's a new $183 million. So a new $183 million, never spent before, that is set aside to create universal vouchers, which means just the top 3 or 4% of the wealthiest multimillionaire Hoosier families who are already sending their kids to private schools, they get a huge public subsidy. So think about that.
Of course they do.
We're worried about grandma being kicked out of her assisted living, right? But yet this budget sends the wealthiest kids to private schools. And we know that those kids already live in the best public school districts in the state. It makes no sense. It's irrational. It's irrational public policy. Another piece of the revenue that's really, I'm frustrated with Republicans for not thinking about, while they are squeezing our local governments and squeezing our schools and not providing real relief to our taxpayers, they're also not looking at some really popular proposals to increase revenue. And those are the cigarette tax that the vast majority of Hoosiers support, which would create about $200 million a year that would help us with Medicaid funding. But also, and not speaking for anyone else, but I support legalization. The last estimate I saw would create about $175 million per year. And I think that's just a practical solution today in Indiana with all of our neighboring states having a regulated market, right?
They're everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, the billboards, which they want to try to stop us because you won't know that the other states are legalized if you don't see the billboards. But
we're squeezing our schools, but we're not doing these common sense things that most Hoosiers support. We
Right.
know most Hoosiers support them.
Well, let me ask you this. We'll just do this as kind of like just a quick answer, and you guys just answer it. Then we'll get back to some other things. So, budget shortfall for Medicaid. Republicans have been in a supermajority for 15 years or so. So, who's to blame for Medicaid shortfall?
Oh, this has happened on the Republicans' watch. They need to take responsibility for it.
They've been in a supermajority for 15 years or so.
Majority for 20, yeah.
20.
Almost 20, if you round up, it's almost 20.
So when you hear Republicans in the General Assembly talk, or in the governor's office or the lieutenant governor's office, or the right-wing radio out of Indianapolis talk about the issues that are plaguing Indiana and Indianapolis, there's really only one place to place blame right now, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, we came in, the House Democrats came in this session with an agenda for working families that included working on lowering the cost of living, whether it's property taxes, utility costs, housing costs, healthcare, looking to fully fund education and support our public safety community and our veterans. That was our agenda, right? And
Mhm.
I thought, boy, this feels pretty common sense and could find some bipartisan support here. I don't think on any of these items, Cherish, we've seen movement from the Republicans. We've seen the opposite
No.
in some cases, like utilities, right? Cherish and I are on the
Yeah.
utilities committee.
Now,
Yeah.
Cherish, you had mentioned Medicaid earlier.
Hmm.
When you take a look at Medicaid, and maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, I've been a couple times in my life, 41% of all births in Indiana happen under Medicaid. Over half the children that have insurance have it through Medicaid. 70 to 75% of seniors in nursing homes have it through Medicaid. So what happens when they cut Medicaid?
People are going to be hurt, and that is the sad reality. We voted, well, I didn't vote for it. The bill got voted out of Ways and Means last week. I think it was Thursday. Maybe it was Wednesday that it got voted out. And some of the things that were of a major concern for us was that they had wanted to get rid of the marketing piece for Medicaid. So they didn't want people to know that they qualify for Medicaid.
Right.
So they're going to do some type of hybrid to try to bring that back because it got so much pushback. Well, it kind of makes sense. How do you have a program and you not market the program, particularly to people that might need it? About 200,000 people are going to get kicked off.
They're
So
going
you
to
have,
limit it to 500,000 people, correct?
yeah, 500,000 people, which means 200,000 people are going to get kicked off. And the other thing that is so egregious, which reminded me of the IBM debacle that happened, and you all will probably remember that, where now under the new program, every quarter people are going to have to submit their paperwork to show that they qualify for the program. With IBM, people were sending in their paperwork and it was being lost. And people were not getting services with FSSA. And so now you're going to have a program where people who qualify for the program, they're going to have to send in their paperwork 4 times a year. Some people don't have computers. We're talking about the neediest of people. Some people that don't have computers, they may not have transportation. And if the system loses their paperwork, they can get kicked off the program. So what's going to happen? The emergency room now is going to be the place where people are going to go to get their health care. And that is more costly and expensive than just taking care of the person where they are. We have to meet people where they are when it comes to health care. Because if we don't, we're only putting more costs and burdens on the system. If you're, like here in Indianapolis, you have to go to Helton Hospital or Eskenazi, then they're going to have to write that off. If they go to any of the other hospitals, those hospitals are going to have to write that cost off, or we're going to have to find another way to fund them so that they're not writing those costs off. So it's not a win-win. It's a lose-lose. And the biggest loser of all of that are the people who need the services and healthcare the most.
Carey?
Yeah, there's something really important here to point out, to add on to what Cherish just shared about the eligibility piece, where they're doing quarterly reviews of people's eligibility. That is a crazy amount of bureaucracy that they're creating. And what does that mean? That means the agency is going to spend millions of dollars on a vendor to try to weed people out of the system. So fewer people on healthcare, right? That's how they're spending money. So this is folks who are falling over themselves to be like Doge, to be government efficiency, right? And they're creating this whole big bureaucracy around Medicare. But also, here's another example in state government they've created that's also ridiculous big bureaucracy. In education, if you're a millionaire and you want the state to pay for your private school tuition now, you're eligible. If you want to send your kid to pre-K, you have a 6 or 7 step process if you're eligible, if you're low income and eligible and can do all these steps. That's crazy to me. And that's a whole big bureaucracy that we're funding instead of just sending kids to pre-K.
And all the while they're buying luxury SUVs, having a helipad put in the personal residence.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's right.
You can go down the line, the hypocrisy that just drips from this administration.
One more, let me give you one more. Just a few short years ago, the state lost $150 million in a virtual school scam. It was stolen from the way we manage virtual school dollars.
I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to tee this up for you. How much did the state get back from that?
$0. $0. Have we put new safeguards in place? Not really. Are we expanding dollars to virtuals? Yes. Yeah. It makes no sense. It's not fiscally responsible.
Now, Cherrish, anything else to add? Because I know you wanted to talk about voting rights and voter suppression here in Indiana.
So I can go right into that because I'm also on the elections committee as well. This year my committees have turned into the hotbed committees. Well, elections and ways and means, I would say.
And utilities.
And utilities, yeah. And we serve on that. But yeah, so we have 2 bills that came up in elections this year, and they're both just really voter suppression. Well, one is a voter suppression. One is just a completely partisan bill, which is quite frankly the name of the bill. Right now, school boards are nonpartisan, so you don't have to declare whether you're a Democrat or Republican, Independent, anything. You just have to say, I want to serve my community, but I don't want to. I don't want to be an elected official. I don't believe in partisan politics, but I want to do something in my community. So I'm going to serve on the school board. That's the way it is right now. We have a bill that has passed the House and the Senate that is going to make school boards partisan. We heard from a lot of people on the school board last year or a couple of years ago when we initially heard the bill, that people who were served on the school board said, you know what, I don't care if my fellow school board members are Democrat or Republican. We're here to do what's best for our kids. This year, I guess some people in Hamilton County, Republicans, lost, and they were upset that some Democrats are now on the school boards in Hamilton
Those damn
County.
Democrats.
So we're upset that those darn Democrats. How dare them have the audacity to run for school board and win in Hamilton County? So now all of a sudden we have a bill, which will probably become law, that is going to allow for people to declare whether or not they're Democrats or Republicans on school board. And the thing is, people don't care about that. When they are running for school board, they just want to make sure they have a good superintendent. They want to make sure that teachers are paid. They're trying to figure out how teachers are paid. They're trying to figure out how they can best spend property taxpayers' money without having a referendum. And now the Republicans have decided that, you know what, we need to know whether or not someone is a Democrat or Republican, because they may not have the right moral. They may not have my morals or values. And that's what is really all what it boiled down to, whether or not this person is a Democrat or Republican, because the Democrat platform is not the platform that I want, is not a platform of an individual that I want to serve on my school board. The other piece of that concerned us was the Hatch Act, because there are a lot of people that work for the federal, I won't say a lot, but there are some people that work for the federal government who serve on the school board, and they're able to do that because they're not required to vote as a Democrat or a Republican. So we're going to be losing some people who have been good and faithful school board members simply because of this bill. And that's quite fortunate for those communities, because those individuals, they've been serving for a while. They have a good knowledge base for the school board. So I'll stop there and I'll talk about the next one because Representative Hamilton may have something to add to that.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, thank you, Cherish. We're both pretty fired up about this bill. And poor Cherish has to run that committee. I feel for you on that committee.
My God, it's hard.
I will add to Cherish just mentioned the Hatch Act, and I think that's really important, right? All federal employees, it includes everyone in the military, National Guard, it includes any, university researchers who get federal funding. It's a lot of folks that now are not eligible. And then there's also all the folks who would want to serve, but only because it's a nonpartisan position.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there are a lot of folks that want to serve their community, but don't want to put on a R or a D by their name. And that's almost more concerning to me because I've known many folks like that in my communities and in the school districts that I serve. Many, many, many. And I know that I've supported some folks who consider themselves Republican, but were strong public school supporters and brought, great experience in the community, parents and et cetera. So it goes both ways, right? Like we'll lose some talent from our community that might not fit the mold they're trying to create here. And it's just not good for our schools. Although I don't think public schools are priority for the Republicans. They made that clear. So that's not their concern.
All right. Well, we have to start wrapping things up here. I'm going to give each of you an opportunity. We'll start with Carrie. Is there anything you wanted to cover that maybe I did not ask you?
We covered a lot, but it's really disappointing. I want folks to understand we have not done a good job of making it clear what we're focusing on at the State House. And it really is about helping working families, helping people have a chance to thrive. And that means right now, it means controlling costs, not controlling, but, doing what we can from a public policy perspective to reduce the costs of basic necessities and when it comes to utilities, we've had some opportunities to protect folks from increased utility rates, and Republicans aren't moving in that direction. They're moving in the opposite direction. Healthcare, I'm really concerned we're not going to make progress there, and we could. But all the players aren't at the table. There's a whole lot of campaign finance money in that area, and we're not making progress. It goes on and on. We're thinking about people. They're thinking about divisive social issues and privatizing education.
Cherrish?
Thank you, Gary. One other voter bill that I'm going to talk about real quickly is Senate Bill, I believe it's 10. That's a voter suppression bill. And that is going to make it harder for students going to college to vote because they're not going to be allowed to use their student ID. Many of the universities, I think only except for some locations at Ivy Tech, don't have an expiration date. So now they've been able to use their student ID. When Senate bill becomes law, they will not be able to do that. A lot of those students may or may not vote for Democrats, but it's very unfortunate that we're making it harder for the people that we should be saying get engaged. They don't want them to vote. But the other thing I would like to encourage people to do that are listening and watching is to follow us on the internet. All of our meetings and sessions are live streamed. And so you don't have to come down to the State House to see or hear what we see or hear in committee and on session. Some of it make you sad. Some of it might make you cry. Some of it may make you mad. And some of it you're just going to be quite surprised about. But I would encourage people to go on the internet, to follow us. The archive meetings, they're on the internet. So you can watch those. Particularly, go and watch the elections committee so you can actually see and hear what we see and hear. Because I think it's important for people to know and hear what is being said. Who is fighting for you and who isn't. And you don't have to be at the State House to do that. You can sit there in the comfort of your homes in your pajamas, in your slippers, and know exactly what is going on. Everything that we do is on the internet.
That's why I'm not standing up, because you will see that I am in my pajamas and my slippers. So, and it's funny you bring
don't stand up, Gary.
It's funny you bring up the student ID, because I was interviewing former Senator Evan Bayh about a month ago, and my first run into politics, I was coming back from football practice, got off the elevator at Hurlbut Hall in Muncie at Ball State, and there was Evan Bayh shaking hands, asking people for their votes right there in our dorm, 1986, as he was running for Secretary of State. He, that takes all that away now. And,
Yeah.
it's voter suppression to its fullest. Some of the requirements now with these real IDs is just trying to get an old marriage license so my wife can get a real ID is just insane. So, but I thank both of you for being on tonight. Before we let you go, though, we do need to thank both of you because you are sponsors of the newsletter, and we appreciate the support you give us there. And then also we need to thank Robin Winston, who supports the newsletter, helped me get it started along with this podcast. Robin is a great Hoosier and really helps get things done about anything that he does. And then we need to thank our other sponsor, former Congresswoman Jill Long Thompson. She has her book out, Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America. And then if you look down below somewhere, I don't know, there's a subscribe button, like our YouTube channel. We've only had it up not very long, and we've already had 20,000 viewers. An interview we did the other day with Josh Lowry, to over 11,000 views on that. So, we're fighting back. We're helping you guys fight back. You help us fight back, and we appreciate it. So thank you both for your time this evening.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
All right,
Congratulations.
thank you. She's Representative Cherrish Pryor. She's Representative Carey Hamilton. I'm Gary Snyder. This is the Snyder Report podcast, and we are out.